Okay, so we're going to introduce a sutta this morning. Again, in this topic of looking at needs and desires, which Nelly started off yesterday. And the sutta is called the Kalahavivada Sutta, or the Sutta on Quarrels and Disputes. That's, I think, easier to remember. Yeah.
And we're just taking a few lines from them and the sutta rather than the whole sutta. And I have some quarrels and disputes with some of the words of the sutta.
I mean, really, we've discovered over the years how we read the suttas. There's really a spectrum of how to read them. And yes, so we'll go into looking at a line that talks about a warning and warning us against liking or holding things dear. And we think that both of those are different words or different ways of saying desire.
So I'll read the first one and from Andrew Olensky, and then you can read the second one. They're similar. It's a different translation of the same words from the Pali. Quarrels and disputes develop from liking, and the sorrow, the grief, the selfishness, the pride, arrogance, and slander that go with them. Selfishness is yoked to quarrels and disputes.
And the second translation is from Thanissaro Bhikkhu. From what is dear, there have arisen quarrels, disputes, lamentation, sorrows, along with selfishness, conceit, and pride, along with divisiveness. Tied up with selfishness are quarrels and disputes.
So I think the reason, and this is my confession, that I have so much trouble with suttas is because they can paint things so black and white, so binary. Desire is bad. And then it leads to all this bad stuff. And not that it doesn't. When I have strong desires, I will get into quarrels and I will get into sorrows. And I can become selfish. I can become conceitful, prideful, but also many other things that are much more positive and onward leading depending on the desire.
Right. And, I read your talk yesterday, and just what we typically do, we talk about how complex and complicated things are. And we're really referring to, conditionality, the teaching of conditionality when we bring in a topic. So rather than trying to narrow something down and say, this is this and that is that, we're broadening it and learning how to hold that. And as we hold that complexity and become more familiar with it, I think that's an understanding of dependent arising, of conditionality.
Yeah, and aren't we sort of teaching that from this direction and that conditionality, dependent arising from this direction and that direction? But we often go in the door of what I did yesterday, which is a situation in one's life and how complex it actually is. And that, and I used an example from my own life yesterday, but it's quite a common, I wouldn't say formula, but direction maybe is a better word.
Yeah.
And the suttas seem black and white to me. That's why I have a hard time with them. But maybe that's just how they got translated. This is what I believe, that's how they got translated many hundreds of years later, that they couldn't put all the complexity into the written word, especially maybe just when they were learning how to do that thing, the written word.
The written word. And the written word is limited. We know that, it tends to put things into certainty and making statements. And so you have to give a lot of caveats with the suttas, which I think is what we're doing. We're kind of trying to bring in a fresh perspective from how we're reading them now, because we're going to actually go to an Instagram post, or is it a Facebook post?
It was a Facebook post.
That Nelly found, which gives us an idea of what we're trying to do with our teaching. So Nelly, why don't you read Dr. Frizzle?
This a friend of mine posted this. Otherwise, well, I wouldn't have seen it, but I liked it. Once I was at the optometrist and he was measuring my ability to see colors, and he said, quote, "The thing about biology is that nature doesn't really do binaries, only spectrums." And I think about that a lot. And there's a beautiful picture of probably not all the colors, but many, many colors. Um, and I bet my friend posted this because of what's raging around trans and non-binary politics, shall we say. And, it's just not like, that's not like that either, right? And hasn't been throughout history.
But it's interesting, like looking at the image, I could also get a little dizzy or a little
Uh,
off kilter or drawn in certain areas. And I do think that that's part of broadening things, of making them more complex, that we'll get into areas where we're a little more confused or dizzy or, not sure which way to go.
mhm, mhm. And yeah, and that's why we need more simplicity, maybe especially at times of stress
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
or
mm-hmm.
because this can be overwhelming.
Yeah, I'm going to stop the share now just to warn people of transition. Now we're back into the group. Um, I'm sorry, Nellie, I lost my place.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So holding things dear, the I want, because when you hold things dear, you want them. I
Right,
mean, it just goes together, right?
right.
And I like that translation, holding things dear. I mean, it's just it's complicated too, but is it on the path? More traditional monastic Buddhism would say no,
Right,
it's
right,
not on the path.
right. And I think we are making somewhat of a stand, or at least the opinion or the experience that holding things dear is part of our path, and that we're not looking to make it taboo, or to just cut it off before we know what's dear to us, what we want. Go ahead.
And what that dearness leads to, right? Because that's the problem. If it truly is leading to um, quarrels, dispute, lamentation, sorrow, selfishness, conceit, pride, we need to take a deeper look at it. That's a big problem, you know?
Right,
But I
right.
don't know how you know that in direct experience without going into it for a while.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's what we're saying. And that's why we want people to bring their personal lives into their meditation sittings, and the things that we're struggling about, the wants and desires that take us off, into addiction or into obsession or into excessive fun. That's,
Or into bankruptcy or
yeah, like you talked about yesterday. Yes. Um, but another part of it is the history of, I would say, many of us, of deprivation. And you talked a little bit about that yesterday, but this kind of needing less, not wanting to be a bother to people, not wanting to have more wants or desires. And that, anorexia is a disease of deprivation. It can go into disease, this not wanting. And it can be really horrible, and it could really be harmful and unhealthy in its own right.
right. So we're going more towards not what's, anorexia is like malnourishment is the, like, let's say the less uh, lethal
Mhm.
version of it,
Mhm.
because it actually can kill. But we're going for the opposite. We're going for what's nourishing. And I would say, and you would say, I'm sure too, that puts us squarely into the secular Buddhist camp, because also that's what the secular Buddhists we know are talking about, what leads us to be thriving, flourishing. That's a
Right,
lot of the words they would use.
right. It's interesting. We started off with kind of healthy desires, and then now looking at, like, what is health? Health is, something that's, engaging, satisfying, leads in a direction, of connection.
And it's interesting being present, which is, another way of being present rather than just um, being present to neutral sense-based objects, being present to that which we love.
Mhm. Yeah. Okay.
I think it's my turn today to ring some bells here.
Thank you. Yes.